Here's a bit of history that was happening the same year that the WR-212 was built. Between January and August of 1937, the U.S. Army Air Corps took its first delivery of 13 of these aircraft. Of course, anyone that knows airplane history knows that this is the B-17. Here's one flying a mission over Europe during World War II. They called it the Flying Fortress because it was bristling with defensive armament, these 50 caliber machine guns, and they would protect the airplane from the attacks of enemy fighter planes. This airplane started its life as the Model 299. Here's one right here flying over Manhattan, New York. And it looks a little different with the side blisters on it, but you can see the basic design built into this airplane that would later become the B-17. You notice that the tail section is different, and the way that the nacelles are for the guns are a little bit different on this early aircraft. But in the end, this airplane was developed into the airplane that really changed the course of World War II, and in the process turned this airplane into a legend that's just as powerful today as it ever was. I have finished what little bit of circuit work needed to be done inside this sub chassis. Basically a couple resistors, a couple capacitors. That's about it, really. I'm going to go ahead now and see about trying to put this beauty back in the chassis. Now, yikes. That is the error that I desperately wanted not to make. There we go. Okay. That's not good. Alright, so I think I'll go about it this way. The less handling of this that I do, the better off I think I am. I have everything through here that I need to be. Now I have to try and attach these. Okay, I see a problem. Let's see if I can get you to see the problem. See, this detent here needs to go that way, and the shaft is sticking out too far on the back end, and that's okay. Remember when it fell apart, I kind of had to get it together real quick. I'm going to have to reattach those two wires that were securing this thing in position or when I took it apart. I have to be kind of careful here, so I don't want to touch that coil. Those two wires are soldered back in position. Those were the only two wires that really connected the two sections of chassis. Okay, so next thing is that tuning condenser has to be mounted back onto this. This little resistor looks rough, but it's actually measures spot on, so I don't see the point in replacing it. Besides, it looks kind of cool. Those tiny little, I think it's a 1/4 watt dog bones are kind of cute. So I think I'll leave that be. Alrighty, now mounting this tuning condenser assembly onto the chassis is really a simple matter of attaching these 2 feet with the screws into their holes, and that's for the mechanical side of it. Now the electrical side is a little different, but we'll get to that in a few minutes. Okay, I like to use star washers even though they weren't originally there, because these things have a way of working loose. Even though they're hex head screws, the head is not very tall, and so you can't really get a driver on it very well. Alright, so this is all assembled together. The next step here is to fix up these light sockets, these dial lamp sockets. basically I'm going to disconnect the lead from the center post of each socket, and what that is that's the center conductor, that's the end of the light bulb, and that's the hot side, and they ground through the chassis here. I may have to, by the way, now that I'm thinking about that, I may have to strip a little bit of paint where these will mount. It's not a big deal. I've already done that in the holes for these guys. So I'll remove the wires from this terminal right here, from this terminal right here. I'll either fix up the wires or I'll replace the wires, and I'll clean up these light sockets and make them look real nice, and then I'll put it all back together. All right, I'm going to start to take these apart. So with this kind here, where the wire runs up into the socket, usually you can just push them out like this. And once you do that, you expose the little terminal. And of course, this spring will be up on this. There's usually a little plastic doohickey here. I don't know what to call it. That the actual little contact sits in. It's like a little contact holder. Well, the spring will fit on that. Usually they don't fit quite this tightly, but you want to get the spring out of the way. So you slide the spring down the wire like that, out of the way. And now you've exposed the little contact and the wire. Now this type here, the wire, it works like a pin, like a tube pin, or like a connector pin. The wire runs up into this hollow contact and it's soldered in place. So if you want to get that wire out, what you really need to do is get that solder out of there. Now I'm looking at this wire and I'm thinking, why do I want to do this? This wire looks pretty good except for right here. And I can put a piece of shrink tubing over that right there and protect that wire there. And I think that's what I'm going to do. If you look at this wire, it attaches at the other end to this socket right here, and this socket does have to be reworked. This thing is filthy, so I'm going to determinate these wires from this one anyway so I can clean this up. Both of these I want to clean up, but this one will be easier to do. So I'm going to remove the wire from here without cutting it. I'll just desolder it, remove it. I will clean up the wire. I'll put a piece of shrink tubing on the end to keep it from fraying anymore. I'll put a piece of shrink tubing over this end here to keep that from fraying and to insulate it, and that should be good. And I'll also clean up these sockets. So let me get these wires disconnected here. And you soak it up into this soldering braid. Piece of cake, right? I don't know why people feel like they have to wrap wire around a terminal 20 times. Once is good enough. If you do a good solid soldering job, once is good enough. You don't need to wrap a wire over and over and over. All that does is make it more difficult to remove it when you have to. Alright, I'm cleaning this guy up with a little bit of lacquer thinner. It's real simple. It doesn't require a degree in rocket science to know how to do this. I like to use a wire brush on these parts because it kind of gives it a nice little finish when I'm done too. Okay, no need to go nuts. That should do it. Well, I tell you something, this radio has rust everywhere, even the light sockets. All right, I've gone ahead and I repaired the ends of these wires and resoldered them to the tube sockets so that they're not about to break or anything, and the wire has a little bit of strain relief. So that part's done, and you can see I've gotten these leads, these solid copper leads from the band switch down below, that connect up to the tuning condenser. I got those soldered on. I've got the grid cap wires repaired and soldered on, so they're ready to go. That part's done. This cute little resistor, this little dog bone, it measures within about 1.5 ohms of what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a 50 ohm resistor, and I got it 48.6. So that's pretty good. It's so cute. I thought I'd just leave it there, just leave it as it is. So I don't see the point in replacing something. It's going to be low current anyway, so it's not likely to drift anymore. All right, and then here we go with the last bit, the ground straps for this tuning condenser. Now I just want to show you, they go on these little clips right here, these little copper clips that are attached to these fingers, and they're also grounded through these plates here, these frame plates. Well, the way they work is they kind of go, the ground strap wire goes up behind that clip. You see that? There we go. It goes up behind that clip, and then you solder it to that clip. Get the copper clip good and hot with a little bit of solder flux to help it flow, and you solder it to it. No big deal. And I'm going to apply some flux to each of those. A little bit messy. It's all right. I'll clean it up when I'm done. I told you my flux is getting dried out, so I got some new flux coming. As soon as it gets hot, though, it flows just fine. The trick that I use with flux, but eventually it doesn't work anymore, is that when it gets hot and sticky like this here, I take the heat gun to it and I melt it, and you see where it's kind of flowed a little bit, and it'll last for several days where it's more sticky and more useful. And that's okay, because by the time this stuff is not good anymore, I'll get a new one. I find that these things dry out before I finish them all the time. That's maybe it's what I'm doing. Who knows? If you guys know some answer to me doing it better, that's fine. But I use a lot of flux. I like to use flux. Soldering iron is nice and hot. Let's see if I can make this work. Let's tip this on its side. So let's try this again. I'm going to get both the clip and the ground lead hot. Okay, I think I got them. They look like hell, so that means I need to clean them up. Not the prettiest in the world, but I think they're going to work. No damage at all to the paint from that little bit of solder. That just shows you how little heat it actually carries with it. All right, so let me check and see if these things are nice and tight. They sure seem like it. I don't see any problems there. We will begin now assembling all this clockwork and that tuning drum, and then this bugger will be ready to mount back on the set. Okay, look, I am going to clean up this this drum, this gear, and go ahead and install this drum. There's really nothing to this, just wipe off this gear and go ahead and install it. Now I know the dial is half broadcast and half the shortwave bands. And these indicators here, when the condenser is all the way closed, they're horizontal, and when it's all the way open, they're horizontal. And if I look for a witness mark on the brass shaft here, I can see it right there. I can see that witness mark. That tells me that's where the nut needs to go for this to be oriented correctly. So I'll go ahead and get that installed. Okay, I can always adjust it if I need to later, but I think that's about right. Okay guys, check it out. I improvised a little bit, but it worked out really well. I pulled this fine tuning cover back off, this that has that little driven pulley on it, and I found a belt among my stash of nice new belts. It has a square cross section, but I can live with that. That just fit perfectly from the little pulley that sits on the end of this shaft here to the pulley that sits on the end of this shaft. So I could dispense with this whole tensioner arrangement. Besides, I think this tensioner was supposed to have another little pulley on it, and it was gone. So I can dispense with that. And I believe this is going to work out just great. So let me put this away here, and I'll show you. And here's the belt right here. And you can kind of see the drum turning as I do that. Now, I haven't got the coarse tuning knob on there, but if I were to turn this outer shaft here, I can make that work, but it's hard to do because my fingers are still slippery. But you see that? Okay, let me show you coarse. There's coarse. So you see I can make it go fast if I want to, and there will be a knob on there to do that. All right, so there's the clockwork. And if you look real close, and I'll show you in a second, you can kind of see that belt sitting on that pulley. Okay. When you reach the stopping point, the belt just slips like it's supposed to. So I think I'm good, man. Saved by my stash once again. Of course, every time my stash saves me, it's a little less likely that it's going to save me next time. So I have to replenish it at some point, which will be very soon. All right, that's going to have to be a wrap for now. This one's a little bit short, but this is a good stopping point. Next time we're going to take this tuning chassis and mount it back into the main chassis. And we'll go through all the things we need to do to get everything all connected up and get ready for our first power-up test. So I'll let it go for now. It is Sunday morning, May the 28th, and from your Western Outpost in Salt Lake City, this is Michael. That's all for now.